Welcome to Watching the Horizon. I'm Jake, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about skills that every self-respecting prepper should know. Now, I'm not saying that these are the definitive skills or even that these are the only skills that you need. In fact, depending on the kind of prepper you are, the variety of skills that you would want to acquire could be way off. But I think, regardless of the kind of prepper you are, whether you're a homestead prepper or you're a militant prepper or a hippie prepper, it doesn't matter. These skills are really important for every prepper. So I don't want to start some sort of big thing where it's like, well, you really should be doing this and don't forget about this. No, these are just skills that every prepper should know. There is one skill in particular that I feel like often gets overlooked, and I'm going to put this one at the top of the list for every prepper. How to recognize a situation for what it really is. Now, I go onto Facebook, I see it on Twitter and Instagram, and honestly, it's comical. And I get that the anonymity of the internet allows people to sort of be a little bit more maybe boisterous than what they actually are. But one of my favorite things is when somebody would post a situation or a question and they'd be like, hey, in this situation where it's in the middle of the night and the power has gone out and there's a knock at the door and it's like 3 a.m., what do you do? And the immediate response of like half the people are like, lock and load, grab the guns, form a defensive perimeter. Chill out, man. Just chill out. I mean, seriously, you're going to get somebody killed, possibly you, possibly your neighbor, maybe a utility guy. It doesn't matter. Recognize a situation for what it really is. Now, that also means recognize a situation for its potential, one way or the other, and just keep that in mind. But for so many people's first response, is to, I'm going to grab my AK, I'm going to have my 44 on my belt, and, me and the wife and the kids, we all have assigned positions. And I'm like, you live in the suburbs. It's cool, man. The power goes out. It's happened. Is it a little weird that you got to knock at the door at 3 a.m.? It's a little weird. But you know what? If it was really bad, would they be knocking? I don't know. I mean, not enough for you to go all ballistic on people. So recognize the situation for what it really is. But that also means other things. For example, if you're about to go onto, a trip for cross country and it's in the middle of winter, well, recognize the situation. How good's your car? Do you plan on doing any traveling off of any of the main roads? Are you going to be traveling through any really small towns? Are there any passes that you're going to be going through? What if you broke down? What if you broke down in the middle of the night and you were really far away from everyone? Okay, you've got AAA, or maybe you know how to change a tire, but recognize the situation. Do you have water? Do you have warm clothing? Do you have a means to heat yourself if for some reason the car dies? I mean, you just don't know what's going to happen, but recognize the potential of a situation. Most likely, nothing's going to happen. Most likely, you're going to get there and everything is fine. But to be able to recognize, the potential for something going wrong and then preparing for that, that's sort of the credo of the prepper. So just be mindful and don't be so quick to jump to kind of extreme solutions. Be prepared, but by no means should you just, jump right in, guns a-blazing, to something that, turns out your neighbor was just knocking on your door because he saw you were up or something like that. I mean, you just never know. The next one I feel is pretty important for all preppers, really, and that's simply to make fire. But I'm gonna add a little something to that, and I'm gonna say you need to be able to make fire in severely cold and wet weather. If you can make fire in really cold and wet weather, which is really like when you need it the most. If you don't have practice, if you don't know how to do this, you might have read it in a book. Maybe you've seen plenty of YouTube videos on how to do it. But have you ever done it? Have you ever actually gone out when it's raining and tried to build a fire? How many of you honestly can say that you've done that? I imagine most of you have not. Plenty of you have, but most of you have probably not. Man, what a bummer time to like have to plow through a learning curve when your life depends on it. Your fingers get numb, they're practically useless. You know, you read on some YouTube channel somewhere, or you're watching about how, let's take some twigs and, you know, put them in your armpits to dry them out. Yeah, sure, that's not going to work. But practice, and really cold weather too. If you can make a fire in really cold and really wet weather, then making a fire in practically any other condition is going to be a breeze. Give yourself the benefit of the doubt. Use a lighter. See what happens if you try to use a cigarette lighter when it's really, really cold outside. Those of you who have done it know exactly what I'm talking about. It has a tendency to not work very well, but you can make it work. You got to know how. But if you're like freezing to death on the side of the road and no one's coming along, man, what an unfortunate time to make a discovery that in really cold weather, lighters don't work the best. Learn how to make a fire, people. Next up is how to find and purify water in both urban and wild settings. Water is everywhere, most of the time. But it's not always safe to drink. Now, sure, if you're out in the woods or you're camping or something like that and you run out of water or something happens, great, there's a stream, there's a lake, and you know what? You've probably watched enough TV shows to know that you should probably boil that water before you drink it. Okay, great. But what if you're in town? What if there's a creek in town? Is boiling that water enough? What if that water was contaminated with gasoline? Or what if that water is actually runoff from a road nearby? Do you know what kind of stuff's on a road? And boiling the water is not going to help you. When you get chemicals and stuff mixed into that water, you can boil it all day. And just boiling it isn't going to do anything. I mean, you could distill it. You could run it through a filter. You might have to use some sort of chemical process, you know, depending on what is in the water, or just recognize that that's probably not the best water that you should be using in the first place. I mean, your life straw isn't going to get dissolved gasoline out of water. So understand where to find water in an urban setting, in an emergency, as well as a wild setting. They each pose their own unique challenges and can be very difficult. So learn where to find water, how to purify it, what sources are good, what sources are not great. I mean, honestly, given the choice, water you find in an old tire might actually be better than water that you're able to find in a drainage ditch. It just depends on the situation, and you need to be able to recognize that. Basic first aid, and any advanced first aid that you can fit in. Your ability to treat minor medical stuff is going to be pretty important, because it's the minor medical stuff that very quickly turns into the major medical stuff. Plenty of CPR classes out there, plenty of basic first aid classes out there. Really, there's no excuse. But I don't care where you learn it, whether it's, you know, YouTube, or maybe you take a class at, you know, some place in town or something like that. The name of the game here, again, is practice. You have to practice. There's nothing worse than trying to remember or figure out or try to do something that you learned a couple of months ago. It just doesn't translate. Again, skills are something that you just don't read in a book. Skills aren't a skill until you actually know how to do it and you're familiar with its procedure, meaning hands-on. Again, practice your basic first aid. It'll be really important. It's going to go a long way, and it could save your life. Next up is self-defense and security. Now, this might mean anything from hand-to-hand combat to how to handle your weapon, your firearm, knife, anything like that. Self-defense could mean all sorts of things. If you're an anti-gun type of person, fine, whatever. That's not for this discussion. What do you have for self-defense? Do you have any kind of plan whatsoever? Or are you truly a pacifist and just going to roll over? Or do you have a safe room? Whatever it is, have a plan. Know how it works. Know the methods involved. And again, practice. Now, a lot of you own firearms. And I've got a friend of mine who has a firearm. It's a little revolver. He hasn't shot that thing in 10 years, but he has it. It's next to his bed. I don't think he'll ever use it. He's probably too afraid of it. He hasn't even taken it out of the box. He just keeps it there. He doesn't ever go practice. He doesn't ever go shooting with it. At one point, he even joked that the ammo probably isn't even good anymore. It probably is, but you shouldn't be questioning your firearm, especially if it is the method in which you plan to have as the last line of defense in case something should happen in the middle of the night, or in the middle of the day for that matter. So practice, be familiar with it. It shouldn't intimidate you. If you have a firearm specifically, it shouldn't be something that you handle with so much care that you're walking on eggshells around it. Understand it, treat it with respect, the respect that it's due, whatever weapon you end up going with, and then be familiar with it so that you're not some kid playing with a sharp knife. Security can also mean things like perimeter defense. I'm not getting crazy here, but even in a suburban area, having well-lit areas, cameras, some people even have the laser trip alarms, or they'll have the audio alarms where if you open up a door or, break glass, stuff goes off. Be familiar with this stuff. Know how it works. If it's in the middle of the night and all of a sudden you hear a piercing noise, well, what is that? Is it the intruder alarm or is it your smoke detector? You should probably know which one that is because you've practiced. Again, there's that pesky word. Lastly, garden basics. A little bit of gardening could really go a long way, actually. And it's actually a lot tougher than you think it is, especially if you've never done it before. I mean, just taking a seed, sticking it in the ground, and putting some water on it, that is the most basic of gardening. And you're probably going to fail. At least, you're not going to be able to grow enough food that you're going to be able to feed yourself. There's plenty of things that you can sort of cut your teeth on that I highly recommend you just learn about, practice. Even if it's just a couple of planters that you have on your back porch or something like that. Just be familiar with the process. Be familiar with the things that can go wrong. Be familiar with the different elements that you have to pay attention to. Like, is there such a thing as too much sunlight? Well, yeah, it depends on what you're growing. Is there such a thing as too small a pot or too big a pot? Or what about water drainage? Or what about critters? Local, squirrels and raccoons. Or if you're way out there, do you have to worry about, deer or turkey or moles or something like that? So be familiar with gardening. I'm not saying that you have to go out and, dig up this great big huge food plot, and be a pro. But understand what it means to get some dirt underneath your fingernails. Understand sort of the basics. And again, practice. Understand how that works. So those are my tips. I hope they were helpful. I would like to know if there's any absolute fundamental prepper skills that you think would be good. Again, not for my benefit, but for anybody else who is watching this. Again, I'd like to get your 2 cents on what you think is the most important. Again, this is going to be sort of general for all preppers. So anyway, I appreciate you watching, and be sure to keep your eyes open.